United States President Donald Trump is rolling back taxes on dozens of food items as more Americans voice frustration over soaring grocery bills. We'll get to that in just a moment. But first, to the growing controversy over the release of the Epstein files. This concerns the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The U.S. House of Representatives voted overwhelmingly on Tuesday to force the Justice Department to release those files. The United States Senate, the other chamber in Congress, has also agreed to the release of those files, but there are some procedural steps that they have to go through before that is confirmed. Then it will get sent, of course, to the desk of President Trump to be signed into law. Well, to tell us more about this, we're joined now by CGTN's Walter Morris. Walter, great to have you with us. So these Epstein files, they've been making a lot of news for the past few weeks, months, even years, actually. Why are they so controversial?
Well, Anand, I mean, that is the big question. For years, lawmakers in both political parties have called for accountability and transparency. Now, Jeffrey Epstein, as you mentioned, a convicted sex offender with ties to several prominent U.S. politicians. Now, he died in jail in 2019, and since his death, victims and advocates have called on the U.S. government to release all of the information related to the investigation and his conviction. So Tuesday, the U.S. House of Representatives voting to pass a bill that would force the Department of Justice to turn over all of those files. That bill passed 427 to 1, which is very rare for U.S. Congress. But of course, there's been a lot of debate for months. Democrats have accused Republicans of a cover-up, while many Republicans call this a hoax, saying Democrats are just using this as a way to attack President Trump once again. But keep in mind, this vote was made possible because 4 Republicans crossed party lines, throwing their support behind this issue. Then last week, Democrats securing enough signatures to force this vote. And then after days of pressure from his own party, Monday, President Trump changing course, saying he would sign the bill if it comes to his desk. And just moments ago, the U.S. Senate voting unanimously to pass the bill that the House passed. So once they get it, it will move on to the president's desk. So 2 very important steps forward.
So, Walter, this moves on to the president's desk to be signed into law. That means the Justice Department will be compelled to release these files. What do you expect the fallout from this to be?
Well, that still remains to be seen. I mean, we've already seen rifts in the Republican Party, but this evening, the Senate acting very quickly. Now, once President Trump signs this into law, the Department of Justice will have 30 days to release all of those files.
Great, thank you. That's CGTN's Walter Morris reporting there. Now, let's get to our panel to discuss this in detail. Joining us here in Washington, D.C. is Frank Sesno. He is a professor of media and public affairs at the George Washington University. From Virginia, we are joined by John Fishwick. He is a former U.S. attorney for the Western District of Virginia. From Maryland, Joseph Williams is a former senior editor at U.S. News and World Report. And from Miami, joining us is Jadyn Horyn. He is a political analyst. Thanks, everyone, for being with us. Jadyn, okay, let's talk about these Epstein files. As we heard our reporter said, Republicans have been calling this a hoax. President Trump himself called it a hoax. He said it was being spread by Democrats. It was being perpetrated by Democrats. Now, in the last few days, he did a bit of a U-turn. He was opposed to the release of the files. Then he said he would like them to be released. He urged Republicans in Congress to vote to get those released. Why was this? Why did he change his mind?
The writing was on the wall. I think the dam that broke was when the Democrats leaked that he was mentioned, and it became a 5-alarm fire in the White House. But it really became a true crisis on Capitol Hill, and obviously we can see with a veto-proof majority in both the House and near unanimity in the House, one person voted against, and obviously unanimous consent in the Senate, that this is one of those things that we predicted on the show last week, that Republicans would want this to be revealed because, to be honest, this is a bomb that's set to go off, and it's better to err on the side that you want to show transparency and that you want to show truth and honesty. And Trump had no choice. I mean, Republicans backed him into a corner, and much like Richard Nixon many decades ago, an ultimatum was given, and then you saw an about face and a U-turn, and now Republicans are shining light on Democrats who had unseemly ties with Epstein as well.
Right. Jadyn, when you say a bomb is about to go off, what's at stake here?
Well, truly, what's at stake here for President Trump and Republicans is the concept that Epstein himself obviously did illegal activities, and politicians, major politicians, both Republicans and Democrats, were aware. And if Donald Trump was aware, then that is the major bomb to go off. Certainly, ones will go off for Democrats, but they don't occupy the White House and they don't hold any levers of power in Washington. So those would be mere distractions. And as we see, Democrats are hungry to replace their own anyway. So that would be footnotes in history, but certainly taking down the sitting U.S. president, someone as now storied as Donald Trump himself, that would be major.
Frank Sesno, of course, President Trump never wanted to lose an opportunity to go after the Democrats. Now what he is calling for is for the Justice Department to start an investigation into the Democrats' alleged involvement with Epstein. There are some on the Democrat side, like Senator Chris Coons, who says, well, what might happen here is if the Justice Department starts an investigation, they can merely turn around and then say to anyone asking questions or making inquiries, this is a legal matter. It's under investigation right now. We can't comment on it. Could that be some of the strategy involved here?
It could be. That certainly is one thing they can do. The problem is that once they release the Epstein files, the Justice Department won't be the only ones doing the investigating. The public will have this information. The press will have this information. Members of the opposition and the Congress will have the information. And one of the really damaging things could be that it isn't a formal investigation, but it's a public trial almost that could be happening in real time. That's why the Justice Department and others typically say they're not going to release this information. You've got all kinds of people who are caught up in what's been investigated so far. And they are people who might have provided explanations or alibis or been asked questions. And the problem is that there is often guilt by association. We've already seen some people take a terrible hit from this, some of them publicly and deservedly so, like the former Prince Andrew. Mm-hmm. And most recently here in the United States, Lawrence Summers, former president of Harvard University, former Treasury Secretary. His friendship continued. These notes indicate that he continued to have correspondence. We've seen some of it where he was just ignoring what Epstein had been already convicted of. And so by association, he's so tarnished. So yeah, the Justice Department will do its investigation. Yeah, there may be ways to use that to try to suppress certain amounts of information, but so much could now be public and so much is going to be out there that it's going to be hard to control.
Frank, to continue that analogy that Jadyn made a moment ago, are we sitting on something politically, something like a time bomb right now?
It depends. Something's been ticking very loudly, whether it's a clock or a time bomb, I'm not sure. It really depends what's revealed in all of this and how far these files actually go. It was damaging when the Wall Street Journal and others reported, according to sources they had, apparently Democrats who leaked stuff from the files, that something resembling a Donald Trump signature was on some documents that weren't very seemly. Trump has said repeatedly that his friendship with Epstein ended in 2004, well before Epstein's trial and conviction. But you just don't know with these things. That's the problem. You have these unpredictable elements and bits and pieces that can flare up. And the country is kind of riveted on this now. So it's very hard to predict, I think.
John Fishwick, here we might need some legal help with what is going on. I mean, there's been a great deal of controversy over these files. There's been a lot of politicking. There's been a lot of lobbying, a lot of statements made by the president, made by the Democrats, Republicans, etc. But did President Trump have to wait for legislation to be passed by Congress to release these files? Could he not have released them himself?
I don't think he had to wait for Congress. He's released the Kennedy files, the Martin Luther King files. I mean, he clearly has his thumb on DOJ. He's incredibly active with his input in the department. He could have just said, I want it released, and so I don't know if we are going to get the entire file. DOJ was asked on last Friday by the president and then Pine Bondi to conduct an investigation of Democrats. They listed several folks. DOJ typically in that situation says, well, we've now got an ongoing investigation, so they're very cautious about what they will release. And I think the public really expects to get it all now. They're tired of this kind of being put off. They want to look at it themselves, but I'm not sure we're in the home stretch yet for those documents and for those exhibits and for those testimonies with FBI agents to get out to the public. I still think we got a ways to go. I think the potential for criminal investigations, even if there's not really a criminal act that's been committed, they've got to investigate it now. That could hold things up.
So, John, is there a risk right now, as you point out, that the files may be released, the Justice Department may be compelled to release them, but we could just get a sanitized version of it?
Yeah, and I think people, and wherever they put the blame, I think they've lost confidence in kind of this whole case and what happened here. The suspicion over when he died, that he's died, in 2019. Ghislaine Maxwell is really the only other person who's kind of close to him, and she was sentenced to a hefty prison sentence. So I think there's questions about whatever she said, would anyone really believe it? And so the public is left to, we want to see the documentation. That typically in a federal criminal case is those FBI interviews, the agents' interviews with victims, with witnesses. That's kind of the critical evidence. We've gotten some emails, a lot of emails, many of which are embarrassing for folks, but really in that tranche, as they say, that was released last week, I don't think anybody saw criminal activity there. In fact, DOJ said this summer, we've looked at the files and there's no other criminal activity that can be prosecuted. So, I hope DOJ just releases it all, let the public decide that, but I do not think that's going to happen.
Joseph Williams, as I said, this has been making news for quite a long time. Trump has already been mentioned in these emails from the files, the ones that the Democrats released. But do you think he faces more political peril? And of course, that also begs the question, how does that square with his call to release the files?
Well, I think part of the central crux of the matter here is that we don't know what we don't know. Donald Trump has called for a release of these files. Certainly he did a 180 after spending the good part of his first year trying to block their release, trying to deny and deflect and obfuscate. There's nothing to see here. And now he did a 180. And I happen to think that that's probably for a reason. As your previous guest said, I'm not sure we're going to get everything. The one check, mainly because of the Trump does have quite a tight grip on the Justice Department. There could be a wink and a nod. There could be some kind of a deal here to keep some stuff suppressed. It could be official channels that have said, well, we can't release this because we can't talk about an ongoing investigation. We've talked about all this stuff in the last couple of minutes, but I think the one X factor here we have are the victims. The victims will know what is or what isn't in there based on what they've told the agents and based on their own personal experience. We don't know that we don't know that they would have a complete picture, but judging by some of the things that the victims have said already, it's pretty damning. So I think that a couple things are at play here, given the fact that we already know that Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump were tight buddies for a long, long time. We do have emails indicating that they still corresponded even after Epstein's conviction and that they still associated in the same circles. So the question is whether or not Donald Trump believes he can control that level of information and is going along with it to make it look as though he's being transparent, or if he kind of understands that what's in there is not going to harm him, even after the Justice Department has kind of done its work and gone through and either sanitized some of the files or kind of figuring out a way to ensure that the most damaging information won't see the light of day.
Jadyn Horyn, let's move on to the economy right now. Let's leave the Epstein files for a moment. There was another U-turn by the president. He will roll back tariffs on up to 200 items next week. They include food items, beef, coffee, bananas, tropical fruit in general. What is the thinking behind these reversals, and what does it tell us about Trump's broader tariff regime?
The president heard loud and clear from voters that affordability is the most important issue. And given the redistricting wars that are playing, kind of behind the scenes in parallel to the tariffs, and today's most recent ruling on that, it doesn't appear that it's going to go in the way of the president party's favor with redistricting. And so now we have to go back to Politics 101, which is actually responding to and reacting to the needs of voters. And voters said affordability is the #1 thing. They overwhelmingly cite the tariff regime of the Trump administration as what they believe is the current cause of inflation, not the overall cause over the last 5 years. There's still widespread blame for the previous administration, but he did get elected saying and promising that he would lower costs, and they have not gone down in the eyes of the American public. And so Trump heard loud and clear. And as we said before on this program, he is the he is the head of the Republican Party. And if he pivots on affordability, then Republicans will pivot on affordability and meet voters where they are. If he doesn't, then the party won't. And he apparently has.
Frank Sesno, affordability is certainly a big item, a big issue for Donald Trump. In fact, it was his rallying cry in the run-up to the presidential election. He mentioned that in his campaign all the time. Then, of course, it became the Democrats' rallying cry in the run-up to the elections that were held earlier this month. And it paid off for them. Democrats won big in those elections. Trump posted on social media last Friday, he said, affordability is a lie when used by the Dems. It is a complete con job there, all in caps. So how big an issue is this in the run-up to the midterms? We're now less than a year away from those midterms.
It's the biggest issue. I mean, this is what we saw from the exit polling from November 4th and the most recent off-year elections that we had, where the Democrats did exceptionally well. And it's something that is real for people. You know, there's a lot in politics, American politics, global affairs, that people talk about, but they don't feel. But they feel when they go to the grocery store and they pay $14 a pound for coffee that a year or two ago might have cost them $7 or $8 a pound, or when they're paying $8 or $9 for bacon, or $6, $5-6 for a dozen eggs. They're living these costs, and these costs go along, certainly in some parts of the country, with cutbacks in government food support. Where this is real is in people's everyday lives, and it's translating politically. We are seeing in a variety of polls now Donald Trump's approval numbers going into the 30s. That includes on inflation. That's food. That's other costs. And they've heard the tariff talk for so long. Here's the thing on it. Donald Trump blamed inflation when he came in and when he ran on Joe Biden. He now owns it. He's been in office long enough. People have heard the tariffs. He took tariff actions. Now he's rolling it back. It's almost a tacit admission that the tariffs have had some role in inflation. So he owns this now, and this is what's going to determine ultimately how he does as president, what happens in next year's off-year elections.
John Fishwick, there's also a big legal component to these tariffs. The United States Supreme Court heard oral arguments in the legality of the Trump tariffs. Trump was also talking about distributing some of the income he got from these tariffs to U.S. households, $2,000 per household. But what would be the consequences if the Supreme Court decides that these tariffs are not legal, that the executive, the White House, does not have the right to raise revenue? That's the job of Congress.
Yeah, this Supreme Court has had a very muscular view of executive power. They've backed President Trump on a number of areas: immigration, employment situations, law and order. They have a very broad view of executive power, and we're going to have now an executive in this country like we've never had before. FDR would be very jealous of the Supreme Court that Trump has. But going forward, it does look like the one area where they're going to draw a line is the tariffs case. They're going to say that the power to tax is really with Congress, that the president can't do that under the law that he tried to do it for. It looks like the center of the court, Roberts and Comey, are going to find that Trump went too far with these tariffs. And so that'll be a blow to him. But we've been talking about the tariffs, that they're not so good. So maybe that's good for the economy. I think they're aware of it. They want to refund money. You know, I think it's easier for the president to initiate a plan that refunds money into Americans' pockets. I'm sure Congress would agree with that. Whether that'll happen, I don't know. But I do think that they have concerns about the economy, concerns about the tariffs, and they're hearing it. And so they want to put money back in Americans' pockets.
Joseph Williams, as we heard from our fellow colleagues on the panel here, U.S. voters, U.S. consumers are very concerned about the cost of living. If you look at housing, childcare, energy bills, gas prices, all going up. Grocery prices went up 2.7% year on year, that is. Yet, for all the talk about affordability, there hasn't been a clear acknowledgement by the administration or by the Republican Party that prices are rising. There appears to be a disconnect somewhere there. Are they going to pay for this at the ballot box?
It sure looks that way. I mean, you have to remember that Donald Trump did in fact run on affordability. And even now, to this day, he is saying that he's done a wonderful job on the economy, that prices are low, that gas is almost $2 a gallon. So it's who are you going to believe, him or your lying wallets? And I think that there are going to have to be a lot of advisors whispering in Trump's ear in order for him to acknowledge or even admit that there is a problem here that he needs to solve and he needs to focus on. Think about all we've been through since January. We're talking about the tariffs. We're talking about the shutdown. We're talking about the drug boats, immigration, all these things that have not had a lot to do with focusing on why prices are so high and having a strategy to get them down. As a matter of fact, a lot of the things that the president have done has had the opposite effect. So he probably is he's going to need to get religion, I mean, full stop, about the economy. He's grudgingly getting there, but whether or not he's going to get there quickly enough and whether or not Americans can look past all that other stuff, which they tend to do if the economy is good, that is going to be a drag as well, because even if the economy does rebound, there's still going to be a lot of surly people out there wondering what happened to their neighbor who worked in the auto shop, or the people that they got to mow their lawn, and the videos and the occupation of other cities with U.S. troops. There's a lot to get past, and if the economy were doing a lot better, odds are Trump would be in a driver's seat position. Right now, it's looking like it might be a wipeout unless he does better, and he's got to do better really, really fast.
Jadyn Horyn, I guess it's one thing for Democrats to have a low opinion of the president, to criticize him, but there was a poll that was done by the Associated Press at the beginning of this month, and it showed that Republican support for the president is weakening. It decreased from 81% in March to 68%. What are the main reasons for Republican discontent with the president?
Yeah, I think this is a really curious effect of the president focusing on foreign policy instead of domestic issues. What you're seeing is a fracture within the Republican base, specifically the MAGA base versus the America First base, and who are arguing that Trump's singular focus on foreign policy, and I would argue foreign policy successes that he's had. We had the UN resolution that was approved for the Gaza peace plan and the board of peace. But Republican voters are saying, what are you doing for us here at home in the United States? And we elected you to be president for us, not president for the world. And Trump is Trump, and he's thinking about his legacy. He's thinking about big, grandiose things, and he has lost sight. And because of that, Republican voters, they know that he's lame duck. They know that he is going off into the sunset at the end of his term, and they don't have to feel any particular loyalty to him anymore. He said just a few days ago, I am, MAGA. I know best what MAGA wants, and that may be true, but America First is moving forward in that, and in arguing from a more isolationist point of view, and the president just seems not really connected to the base on it.
Frank Sesno, looking broadly across the political spectrum, President Trump is not doing well at all. In fact, you mentioned earlier on that his approval rating was in the 30s. It's actually at 36%. We got that from that same Associated Press poll. What does this mean politically for Trump? Why is the country so unhappy with him right now?
Oh, there's just a lot, and I think we've been hearing this in this conversation. It's everything from the split in the Republican Party as to how much attention is being paid on global issues, foreign issues. Democrats had a very powerful soundbite during the government shutdown, which ultimately they caved on, but nonetheless, it resonated. It probably took some toll, where they were saying, look, the president doesn't want to extend healthcare subsidies for Americans, but he's prepared to bail out Argentina to $20 billion. And so these are things that are discordant, and the experience that Americans are having with inflation, with the tariffs, and there's just a sense of turmoil here. where every day is this sort of very charged environment. And so everybody brings, we like to say, what you see depends upon where you stand. So where Democrats stand, they've never liked Trump, and they felt very strongly about it. Independents have been more split, but that too has been eroding support with the independent vote. And now the numbers that were cited with the erosion on the Republican side is very significant. Trump has got to move quickly to address the issues that people most care about. And we're again back to the wallet and affordability. He's trying to do that. Does it look defensive or does it look reactive? Well, we'll see how it plays out.
Okay, Joseph Williams, I've just got a little over a minute left, but I want to talk about that shutdown, the longest shutdown in U.S. history. Well, that ended, but it ended when the U.S. Congress agreed to what's known as a stopgap funding bill for the government to function, but that's only until the end of January. What happens then?
We're back where we were in October and November. I mean, and that's one of the things to Frank's point, there is a lot of chaos, and this was a temporary stopgap. This is going to be yet another headache that people are going to have to navigate either through their contact with government or through losing their job or through putting pressure on more food banks, running out of food aid. It's all too chaotic, and I think that that's going to be a drag on whatever Trump can get done on the economy, and is going to be yet another reminder in an election year that this presidency is essentially not running as smoothly on all cylinders like they thought it was, or looking after the American people like Trump promised. Now, keep in mind, there's plenty of time. There's a lifetime, a year in politics is a lifetime and no time. So anything can happen. But if this course stays the way it is right now, we're in for, or the presidency is in for a pretty rough ride and a pretty rough midterm. And the Democrats should be focusing their message, if they're smart at all, about what to say about this economy come August, September, and October.
Okay, that's where we have to leave it. Thank you to all of you for being with us. That is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Arland Naidu in Washington.